So China has put in a bid to construct a nuclear reactor in Saudi Arabia, and we're going to discuss why this marks a huge threat to the petrodollar system. And this whole petrodollar system falling apart, the threats to the dollar status as the world reserve currency, it's just one of the reasons why I continue to acquire hard assets like gold and silver. If you would like to do so, make sure you check out today's video sponsor, sdbullion.com. Right now, new customers can get gold or silver at spot by visiting sdbullion.com/new. So make sure you check them out with the link down in the description. Now, let's get into why a Chinese nuclear offer for Saudi Arabia would threaten the dollar, because obviously that sounds a little circuitous. Why would a nuclear power program be a threat to the dollar? Well, it has to do with the ongoing saga of Saudi Arabia potentially abandoning the US dollar as its mechanism for pricing its oil exports. And here's the story from Reuters, today's headline story: Saudi Arabia considers Chinese bid for nuclear plant. This is originally reported by the Wall Street Journal. And the contrast with Sepia Prince in the chat there says, press the like button. Please do. If you're tuning in, don't forget to smash that like button, help get this information out into the algorithm. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to the channel? And a huge thank you to all of you who are tuning in. Now, this was a report from the Wall Street Journal on Friday, and it came as the state-owned China National Nuclear Corporation, or CNNC, put in a bid to construct a nuclear plant in Saudi Arabia's eastern province, and this is near the border with the UAE, which is of interest because, of course, recently Saudi Arabia and the UAE were among the nations invited to join the BRICS organization. We'll be talking about that briefly. I've got a little update for you in regards to that. This wasn't confirmed by the Chinese Foreign Ministry, but they did say this. This was a statement issued by a ministry spokesperson. China will continue to conduct mutually beneficial cooperation with Saudi Arabia in various fields, including civil nuclear energy, while strictly abiding by international non-proliferation obligations. Now, of course, normally an offer from China to improve Saudi infrastructure to give them some energy wouldn't really raise too many eyebrows, except, of course, this one is nuclear, so it leads to these non-proliferation concerns. But more importantly, a civilian is here. Sorry about that, folks. A couple of technical difficulties. Okay, so recently the Biden administration has this program that they are trying to implement between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. And part of that is a civilian nuclear program. That is one of the carrots we are dangling. So it's very interesting that shortly after the Wall Street Journal reported on that potential deal, we now have China putting in their own nuclear offer. Now, there's a couple of ways this could go. I mean, China has, or the BRICS organizations at China's behest, have invited Saudi Arabia to join their ranks, right? So that is sort of the big threat to the petrodollar right now, in my opinion. We covered this a couple days ago when that news broke. But more importantly, this deal from the U.S., it may become very difficult to move forward with this kind of an offer on the table from the Chinese. One thing we do have to consider here is that perhaps the Saudis are just trying to play off the great powers against each other. Maybe they're entertaining this Chinese offer for a nuclear reactor simply as a way to try to get more concessions from the U.S. One of the big things that the U.S. wants to prohibit the Saudis from getting as part of any nuclear program would be the ability to enrich uranium or plutonium, which, while I suppose they do have some kind of a use in a civilian nuclear program, I'm not a nuclear physicist, so I don't know too much about that, but those are the things that can be used for weapons, and so the U.S. wants to make sure that any nuclear program the Saudis have won't involve that. But, perhaps they'll attempt to get the U.S. to allow them to have perhaps a more expansive nuclear program than we otherwise would if they, entertain this offer from the Chinese. So we've got some competition. They're trying to get the U.S. to step up their game. Now, another element of this deal is going to be that Israel needs to make some significant concessions. And I think that also is very likely to be a sticking point here. And there's just several sticking points in this deal. And the problem is that, if this deal doesn't go through, part of this deal is that Saudis accept dollars as their only form of payment for oil. That's really what the deal is all about. And also trying to limit their use of Chinese technology like Huawei tech in their infrastructure. But they're going to have to get the Israelis on board for that. One of the things that they're asking for is Palestinian concessions from the Israelis. Netanyahu is going to be visiting Washington, I believe, in September to try to, try and sell them on this. But that's going to be a bit of a hard sell, significant concessions. I got someone in the chat saying dislike, click away. I'm not sure what that is. Are you disliking the video? Well, hey, listen, if you're watching, counteract anybody who thumbs downs the video. Give a thumbs up and take away the power of the thumbs down. That's all I can really say. Oh, Lars Larson says he dislikes my video every day. Well, thank you for watching, Lars. I appreciate it. Now, let's see. He says it doesn't work that way. I don't know. Let us know in the chat if you're liking the video or disliking. Look at that. Nice little tick up and thumbs up. That is excellent. Thank you very much, everybody out there. Another sticking point here is these reports of human rights violations by the Saudis. Now, the Saudis have disputed this in an official report, but according to this report in the, where is this? The New York Times, the U.S. may have been aware that Saudi border guards were killing African migrants. There was a report a couple days ago that several hundred had been killed by Saudi border guards. And now New York Times reporting that the U.S. was aware of this human rights violation that was occurring. Now, I talked about this in a recent video, and there were a lot of controversial comments on this. The Saudis have denied this. Of course, anybody caught killing civilians probably would deny it, but who knows? And maybe this is cooked up. Some people were saying maybe they thought that the CIA had planted this story, but obviously the U.S. doesn't want this story to become public at this point. I mean, the U.S. doesn't benefit from this story going live because this is going to make it more difficult to get political will behind any kind of Saudi deal. And, that's another reason that the Saudis are probably looking for new partners in the Middle East because they're tired of being subject to the democratic processes in the U.S. where politicians always have to be looking to the next election. And so if, the Saudis do something unpopular, it makes it hard for politicians to, approve arms sales to them, approve any kind of deals with them. And that means that they are subject to the American political system. Whereas if they partner up with folks like China and Russia, more authoritarian, let's say, systems, there's not that problem with, dealing with the political fallout of things. The Saudis also, in addition to energy, a potential nuclear program with the Chinese, they are also looking for, apparently, new partners in the realm of security. So I wanted to discuss that. This is a story we covered recently, but it bears repeating that for the first time, they're going out and trying to buy these French fighter jets, as the French apparently are a little bit more lenient with who they'll sell weaponry to in terms of things like human rights violations, how the weapons are being used. And so rather than purchasing more F-15s, which they currently have a big fleet of, and they were also buying Eurofighters, I believe, but then Germany blocked them from doing that. And so now they've got to turn to France. And so they're looking for new security partners. This is a story from last year. Now, this headline is a little bit misleading. It says Saudis get huge arms deal from China worth $4 billion. And this was a Chinese arms show, the Zhuhai Air Show last year that Saudi Arabia went to. They bought $4 billion worth of weapons, including drones and other high-tech weaponry. But, compared to the deals that Saudi Arabia has with, the U.S., this does pale in comparison, $4 billion, but it goes to show that they're out there looking for new partners. And it's no surprise because, frequently things like this will happen. This is another report from last year, but it just goes to show you why the Saudis maybe are looking for new partners. This was following their production cuts of oil. There were all these calls for reprisal in the U.S. Senate and in Congress, and there was support on both sides of the aisle for limiting arms sales, including weapons defense systems. Some of the politicians were saying we should be sending the Patriot missiles to Ukraine rather than sending them to Saudi Arabia. They were talking about canceling arms sales. And so, Saudi Arabia doesn't want to be prohibited from buying arms from their main security partners due to political problems. And I'm sure if they got on board with Russia and China, the whole energy cutting thing, I mean, that was an OPEC plus cut. Russia's cutting oil production too. The Saudis and the Russians, they've been partnering up on the energy front for some time now. So it just goes to show that the relationship between the U.S. and the Saudis has been changing for some time now, and it's kind of accelerating, and you're seeing that in things like this, what to me is a blatant counter offer to what the U.S. is offering in terms of the civilian nuclear program from China. Saudi bought oil. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on in the chat here. Sometimes it gets away. You guys get into these your own debates about the where the oil is going, I guess, is what you're debating right now. But this is an interesting infographic from Visual Capitalist, and it shows you how much the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the U.S. has declined economically over the past 10 years. This is a measure of trade between Saudi Arabia, and on the top there you can see in red is their volume of trade with China, who is their number one biggest partner. You've got the EU there in the center. They still trade a significant amount with them, but then at the US here you can see it kind of ballooned around 2011. A lot of this had to do with the fact that we began developing our own domestic energy production, and so we began importing less and less Saudi oil. But clearly there's less incentives for the Saudis to remain aligned with the U.S. in terms of economics than they are with China. So if they have to pick simply based on who they have the closest economic ties to, then Saudi Arabia, I think, or rather China, makes the clear choice for them. And we're going to find out where this is going and which way it's going to go very soon. We won't have to wait too long to see. And I think one of the big tells is going to be what happens with the Briss expansion. So I talked about this the other day when the Briss organization was wrapping up their 2023 summit. They extended an invitation to 6 countries, and Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran were on the list. Now, technically, Saudi Arabia has not yet joined Briss, so we're going to have to wait and see whether or not they accept that invitation. They have until January 1st, it sounds like. That will be the date that new members are officially inducted into Briss. And so will the Saudis accept the invite? Hard to say. I mean, it all depends, whether or not you believe that they are simply trying to play the powers off against each other, if they are going to maintain their relationship with Washington and keep their traditional strategic alliance alive with, new rock solid guarantees. That's part of that deal that Biden is proposing. The Saudis will get more weapons. They'll get guarantees of their security from the U.S. military. Although, again, following the last 20 years, witnessing what happened in Afghanistan and the U.S. withdrawal there, those security guarantees may not mean as much. And on that same note, I wanted to mention briefly, I've seen a lot of folks in the comments saying things like maybe regime change will be coming to Saudi Arabia sometime soon. And I understand where that sentiment comes from. Of course, we saw Saddam Hussein had proposed de-dollarizing Iraqi oil sales, taking euros, and we saw what happened to him. Same deal with Muammar Gaddafi. He had been reportedly working on a pan-African gold-backed currency, a gold dinar, to denominate Libyan oil sales in, and he got deposed by those militias who were backed by somebody. Somebody trained those militias. So anyway, I understand why people say that Saudi Arabia may face regime change, although I will say that I don't think that that's really in the cards. I think we're going to try to get them, with honey rather than vinegar. This nuclear program that we're dangling in front of them, I think, is the most you're going to see. Maybe they'll sweeten the pot for the Saudis to come over to the U.S. side, but right now, we have a war in Eastern Europe, which may involve NATO very soon. We have a potential conflict looming on the Korean Peninsula. We have a potential conflict brewing in Taiwan and the South China Sea there between the US and China over Taiwan. So I think the last thing that we need to do is get involved in another disastrous military campaign in the Middle East. We just wrapped up Afghanistan, and I don't think there's any political will for another war in the Middle East. And also just from a strategic standpoint, it would be, I think, quite foolish for the U.S. to stir the pot there. Of course, I'm not a military guy. What do I know? But that just seems like it would be foolhardy. We've already probably got more on our plate than we can handle. We've already bitten off a little bit too much to chew. So I don't think that the Saudis are going to get a regime change anytime soon. That's just my take on that. Thank you, Mr. E. I appreciate the super chat. And anybody who donates or joins as a channel member or supports the channel in any way, even just liking and commenting on the videos is a show of support. So I do appreciate that. We didn't wrap up Afghanistan. Doggone it in the chat says we left it in shambles. Yeah, well, that's fair enough. We might have wrapped it up, but not with a bow on it. It was more like with billions of dollars of military equipment left to equip the Taliban, the folks who took over. So yeah, if we can't regime change the Taliban, it's very unlikely we're going to be able to regime change Saudi Arabia, especially when they have the backing of Russia and China. That, I think, would be a military impossibility, unless we just talk about nuclear conflagration, because that's where that would head, I think. So we will know January 1st if Saudi Arabia joins BRICS. Then I do think that the petrodollar's days will be numbered. It will be a major blow to the US dollar. Will it be the final blow? Probably not, but it will be a significant one. And this de-dollarization story that we've been following for a couple years now, it's a death by 1,000 cuts, folks. It's not that the dollar gets overturned overnight. It is not that, one rival to the dollar appears and everybody adopts that. No, it's just a death by 1,000 cuts. It's, India paying the UAE for their oil in rupees. It is Russia denominating all of its energy sales in rubles or yuan or other local currencies. It is a slow bleed. It is the Chinese paying Total Energies, the French company, in yuan for UAE gas. And all of this, they're small deals. Like the deal between the UAE and India, it was only 1 million barrels of oil. It's like one tanker full of oil. But it sets a precedent that is a declining use of the dollar in settling international trade. And, again, this is coming at a time when we need to export more inflation around the world because we're running massive deficits. We need these countries to buy up U.S. treasuries. We need them to be dependent on the dollar, but they are abandoning the dollar. And that's why I'm getting into hard assets. That's why I'm getting into gold and silver. And again, let's see. Scrooge McStack says in the chat here, how do you expect silver and gold to perform if the Fed keeps rates elevated for longer? I expect that we will kind of trade sideways in the metals. It'll be volatile, we'll be going up and down. We may even see a decline, if the Fed rate hikes bring in some kind of a collapse event, a collapse of the banking sector, collapse of commercial real estate. I do think we could even see the paper gold and silver market sell off, maybe even the physical markets, although I don't think we'll see that. But when we do, I think it'll be followed by a massive federal government and a Federal Reserve response in terms of stimulus, debt monetization, quantitative easing, whatever they call it. I mean, they'll call it something different. But they need a crisis to bring that in because right now, everybody's feeling the pinch for inflation. I think a lot of folks believe that the Fed is behind it, and so the Fed just can't come out and start easing again, even though this economy is falling apart and needs it, and they need to lower interest rates, but they can't because of the optics. But when something breaks and they have an excuse, then I believe they'll be printing again, and then I think the price of gold and silver will really take off. I mean, whether or not gold and silver take off from here or whether they dip and then take off, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to wait for a dip to accumulate because it may not occur, especially in the physical market. You could see a thing like paper markets selling off, but the premiums on physical products just exploding to compensate for that. And I think we're nearing a terminal event like that. There's a lot of factors here, and this end of the petrodollar is just one of the events. I talked about yesterday how it's not really a black swan because you can see this coming. It's no secret that Saudi Arabia is entertaining accepting non-dollar currencies. I mean, in fact, the BRICS nations openly tell us that that is their objective, is to de-dollarize and transition to non-dollar currencies. And then you got Saudi Arabia joining BRICS. So like it doesn't take a lot to put two and two together. Now, you could see again a surprise move. Maybe Saudi Arabia says, "Nope, we're not joining BRICS. We're going to partner up with the US." But I think that at this point that's a low probability event. And if I'm betting on which way this is going to go, it's that the BRICS and the other Gulf nations, I'm sorry, Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf nations, including the UAE and Iran, some of the biggest oil producers, are going to join BRICS, and they're going to eventually abandon the dollar. And that means that all of OPEC is going to stop accepting dollars for their oil payments. You got to understand, this has been going on since 1974. All of these countries have only accepted dollars. So, I mean, you can see the kind of demand that creates around the world. It's like, hey, if you want to buy oil, you need to go get yourself some dollars. But if all of a sudden you don't, and you can just pay in, gold or rupees or, UAE bucks, whatever the currency is over there, whatever the local currencies are, yuan, or maybe, or an Iranian gold-backed cryptocurrency. We know they're working on that. There's all sorts of potential alternatives here. And when they dump the dollar for those currencies for these oil trades, oil is the most traded commodity in the world. It's the lifeblood of the global economy, and so that'll create a huge destruction of demand for dollars, and that means that the price will fall through the floor. There's going to be a lot of dollars flooding back into the West, and the economy has been hollowed out, so there's not a lot of goods and services for those to chase. It means inflation's going to get out of control. I just don't see any other way this can end. And again, it's just one of many factors. You also have the massive deficits and the rising interest rates and the banking sector with $1.7 trillion worth of low yielding treasuries that they are holding at a huge loss. There's the collapsing commercial real estate market. I mean, there's all sorts of problems here. There's the skyrocketing interest on the national debt. And so it's just, the end of the petrodollar couldn't come at a worse time for the US dollar. But it's like they say, these things, how does a currency fail? Well, it kind of happens gradually, but then all at once. And I don't know when that's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball. But it does seem to me, at least, that the devaluation of the dollar, if not its outright end, is guaranteed in the long run. Could be a decade. I don't know. But I think that the timetables have become considerably shorter than that. If you look at the fourth turning generational theory of Strauss and Howe, they label 2026 as the terminal year of this change in the global system. They've predicted things fairly accurately so far, so hey, why not? Seems like as good a year as any. And, in the meantime, I'm just looking at these low prices in metals, trying to average into them, build up my position in them, and get ready, get prepared for the dollar to lose a significant amount of its purchasing power, because right now I know inflation's high, but I think it is going to get a lot higher. So let me know what you think in the comments down below about the end of the petrodollar. Is China going to build a nuclear reactor in Saudi Arabia? Are they going to go for the US deal? How do you think all of this will play out? Because it is certainly a very interesting drama that we are watching play out here on the global stage. And it's anybody's guess how it's going to end, but we're going to find out soon. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe and happy stacking, and I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker, out.